we're pretty lucky that we get to look at a lot of baseball books in general, and people send things to us, and occasionally things catch our eye. And we've had authors on the podcast before, and today we're going to have an author on who came up with a very interesting concept, and we're going to talk about it. His name is Mark Stevens, and he's going to join the podcast shortly. So Gordon and I are pleased to have Mark Stevens join us here on the podcast. And he is the author of one of the best baseball books. I think I've seen it on several lists of 2023, a book called The Fireballer. And he's going to talk to us about that book right now. Thank you, Mark. Welcome to the program.
Hey,
thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, guys.
And
so,
I just wanted to say to start off, having read this book, as somebody that has actually read a lot of baseball books and specifically has read books that are fictional books about baseball, not retelling true events. You know, I had the wild and true baseball stories in my room growing up, but it was so nice to get a piece of baseball property, TV book that actually felt like it understood the game and understood how to show the game when you're reading the book. And it was just like, I was just like, as a fan, it was very refreshing reading that, because I played baseball up and through college, and you're like, oh, he actually gets it. This is how people talk in the dugout. This is how people are. It was so nice reading that.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that. Means a lot.
And so kind of starting there, where did you sort of come up with the idea for this book? Because, I mean, the concept of a pitcher throwing at 110 miles an hour is a really cool idea, but sort of where did this all come from? How did you come up with this storyline?
Yeah. So there are really two halves to the book. One is about the pitcher and the fact that he is sort of anticipating issues within Major League in terms of, pitch speeds being thrown at such incredible rates right now that offense is down. A batter walking up to the plate these days in the major leagues is going to fail 7 out of 10 times. And if he does, he's the richest, he's super rich. He's a wealthy guy. It's a hard thing to do. And a friend of mine suggested the idea of writing a book or writing a novel about a guy who ruins the sport of baseball. Just the idea that, we are on the cusp of getting up to speeds where there's no time left for a batter to get the bat off the shoulder and around through the strike zone. So, he planted that seed with me, and we kicked it around for a while. The other half of the book actually dropped in out of the blue later that same night. I had this sort of other concept. Well, if this pitcher was destroying the game, what if in Little League as a 12-year-old, one of his pitches, when he was also known as a very fast pitching Little Leaguer, what if one of those pitches hurt or worse an opposing batter? And it was just one of those galvanizing moments where the whole character just kind of fell into my lap, and I said, I better write that book.
And it's when you do it that way, right? So it's a book. I actually have told people when I read the book, I think it's about grief and dealing with guilt every bit as much as it's about baseball, and the baseball is a perfect counterpoint to it. But you're a researcher, and you did a really good job of researching this. I know you put a lot of work into it to make it feel real, like Gordon said initially, that it's it's still a baseball book if you want to look at it in that sense.
Yeah, my agent made it very clear when I called him up. I called him up the day after that conversation with my friend, and that later that night I had that idea. Called my agent. I said, Josh Getzler, amazing agent. I said, what do you think of this? And he said, that's great. Baseball books are fine, but it can't only be about baseball. It has to be about something else. You're going to just have such a small audience if it's baseball, baseball, baseball. And I got it. I knew what he meant. And then Josh casually mentioned that he used to be the chief operating officer for the Staten Island Yankees, and in his previous career prior to being a literary agent. So he was there to help me, get some inside baseball kind of insight as well. So that was a great fortuitous kind of coincidence.
I can tell you like Josh a lot because you used his name as Frank's twin brother in the book. So and I had to go back and read it again. So but they were twins, which I guess I knew they were brothers. Maybe I glossed over it the first time, but the fact that they were twins, you don't really make a lot of reference to it. But it sort of brings things home a little bit more when I think about it that way.
Yeah, I didn't overplay that. I agree. And I kind of let it be. I didn't want to make that, too heavy a deal, but the fact that pitcher, catcher, twin brother, part of the same battery, and both there on the same day when that thing happened, as when they were both 12, and two very, very different kind of career and personal trajectories and paths after that. So I just kind of want to contrast that.
And you also take on a couple of baseball traditions, or in terms of things that maybe shouldn't be traditions, that I found pretty interesting, and that is the notion that there should be retribution when one of your own players is hit, and Frank is not okay with that.
Well, I'm just going to come out and say it. I just think it's a little barbaric. I think it's crazy that this is tolerated. We all know it goes on. We've seen many, many instances, and you can say, oh, you don't really know for sure that the pitcher is throwing at a batter. Yeah, they do. They know. There are definitely instances where it might be borderline or something like that. But just like fighting in the NHL, and I'm not going to get into that, just like fighting used to happen a lot in the NBA. There used to be a lot more fights in the NBA. There was heavy drug use in the NBA back in the 90s, and well, we know what baseball and steroids, there are things that all major league sports can do to control their sport. And this is an issue that they could get after. All you need to do is take very, very heavy penalties against the pitchers, not just these 10-game suspensions, which ends up being like maybe 2 starts for a pitcher. You really need to hurt them in their wallet and hurt the team in their wallet.
And there have been a few of those situations, and we'll talk a little bit about how a Red Sox fan can end up in Colorado, and what you did in the 2007 World Series, because that had to be a little bit for you. But we remember when Sean Estes was trying to hit Roger Clemens at one point, and he couldn't hit him. He threw it behind him, and the fans were booing at him.
Well, I can say as a somebody that pitched in high school and college, I remember when I was put into the same position that Frank was, and I didn't like having to do it anymore. For me, I really liked that moment in the book, because even though I never threw anywhere close to as hard as Frank does, I mean, like, I think I would be lucky if I got within 25 miles an hour of him, at topping out. But it was still, I'm a 16, 17-year-old kid, and you're telling me to throw this baseball at 85 miles an hour at another kid. And the last thing I want to do in the world is, like, the way I was equating is, it's like telling the police, oh, shoot to disarm. It's like throwing an 85-mile-an-hour fastball. As good as my control is, all it takes is being a little bit off. We know how much fastballs can move. All it takes is that it goes from normal retribution that's part of the game to what could be a career-ending injury for somebody. And I would hate, as the pitcher, to ever be responsible for actually intentionally hurting somebody like that.
100%, 100%. And if baseball thinks that's somehow entertaining, or, if some parent takes their 10-year-old to the game, and they're sitting through 15 minutes of watching a batter getting treated at the plate while he's down and unconscious, is this something that they really want to tolerate? And I think it's something that they should get on top of, and they could get on top of. Hell, they just put in 15 different rule changes in 2022, and let's get at it. Come on.
And it's different today, because they're a millionaires club, or even more than that, right? So there's a certain amount of these. They don't want to hurt each other because it's a pretty exclusive club, and so it's different than when a guy was trying to take your meal money back in the 1950s. And so there was that sort of different aspect of the personality and why you might take umbrage as opposed to now.
I agree, 100%. Great point.
I remember also watching David Cone pitching for the Mets years ago, and he throws and he hits somebody, and I think it was a big guy. I don't remember who it was. And so the guy's starting to come out to the mound, and you can read Cone's lips going, "It was a curveball. It was a curveball. I wouldn't try to hit him with a curveball."
And I think back to the Syndergaard thing between the Mets and the Dodgers a few years back, where he threw behind the guy because he threw so hard. He's like, I don't want to hit a guy throwing 101. Like, I know what that could do. So he threw completely like 5 feet behind the guy in an attempt to sort of navigate his way around the unspoken rule. He ended up getting suspended a game. But to me, that just, I was like, wait, so if he actually hit him, he probably wouldn't have been suspended for a game, which just means this entire situation is totally backwards.
There you go. There you go. Yep.
I
You
thought,
go ahead.
oh, no, go ahead. No, you go ahead.
You have him pitching at 110, I think topping out about 110 miles an hour.
Yeah.
So that's really cool because it's not feasible for a fan like us to look at it and go, well, I guess there could be an outlier out there who could get it up that high. The fastest pitch recorded, they say, is Aroldis Chapman's 105, but you can read 10 different things and come up with other speeds. Bob Feller threw it 107. You're going to go back and look at that. But the idea that just that little bit of difference, right? That's like 3%. Difference would make him virtually unhittable, which it does in the book. I think it shows that you're pushing the limits, but you're not making it so unbelievable that he threw 120 miles an hour like Sid Finch or something like that, or 150.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I could have just left it at the top speed, 106, let's say. Let's say you get an Aroldis Chapman who comes out and throws that steadily at 106. And it is kind of interesting when you go online and watch those pitches coming in on the YouTube clips of Aroldis Chapman or Jordan Hicks or these guys. You actually can see people in the dugout, batters in the dugout, kind of laughing because it's just ridiculous to try to think about getting a bat on a ball that's coming in that fast. I could have left it right there. I thought, well, let's just look around the corner just a tiny bit. Yeah, it's a tiny, tiny bit of a fairy tale that this guy is that good and has that much control. But I just wanted to ask the question, how does baseball deal with this? And then the overarching question really is that individual, given what a 12-year-old, how would a 12-year-old mind come to grips with having gone through that experience? We talk about injuring somebody, but what if it was even worse? And just imagining the weight. Here's the exact same thing that gives you so much pleasure is something you have driven and wanted to do all your life, is throwing a pitch from a mound and being the best at it. That very thing that gave you pleasure ended up in a very tragic situation. Accident, yes, but this is something one human being is asked to live with, both these things. So the character was really what I wanted to get into.
I so much think that's what made it such a good book. Was that made Frank feel such a real and fully realized character, because to me that was such an interesting struggle that he's going through, that he loves baseball so much, but because of what happened in his past and what happened with Dion, it just weighed on his psyche so much. And for me, watching his journey through the book and his sort of him progressing, I was liking it to freedom. He was free from the shackles of his past by the end of the book. And to me, that was the going through that journey with him was what made it really rewarding.
Redemption. He needed redemption. He needed some sort of restart. Yeah.
Because it's easy to be like, oh, he just needs to forgive himself. And it's a lot easier to say that than actually get there and be able to do it.
Amen. That's perfect. Exactly.
I want to turn to the safety aspect because, like I said, not hitting the player on purpose with the way people throw today. And if you're supposed to hit somebody, I guess you're supposed to hit him below the belt or the midsection in the legs or whatever it was. But we also, Gordon, I feel that pitchers aren't protected on the mound themselves in today's baseball enough. And we had Willie Blair on our podcast a couple of years ago, and he had the misfortune of being hit by a baseball that almost killed him in a major league game. And so we suggested that again, like you're suggesting to a degree, Major League Baseball is complicit here in not helping Little League. Like maybe all the pitchers should start wearing helmets, little protective helmets on the mound when they're little leaguers, so they won't say, well, he can't start when he's 18. He's been doing it this way his whole life, until it takes somebody getting hurt or worse, as you put it,
Hello hockey again with what happened with the, accidental skate through the neck and took a life this year. And I think it was in Europe. But, these are anticipatable kind of events, and we know that it's gonna happen. And I think it was a first base coach for the Colorado Springs AAA
Right.
team a couple now 10, 12 years ago, maybe
Hit by a line
15,
drive.
20
Yeah,
years
yeah.
ago. Yep. I mean, you're out there in in the line of fire. And I agree with you. Yeah.
We had there was a young boy here in Connecticut that had the same thing happen with the neck, and they have changed what what kids have to wear now and all that as a result, which, thank goodness they didn't do nothing at that point. But yeah, I think questioning those age old traditions, really, really good.
And then the nets, putting up the nets to protect the fans. I'm all in favor of that. It doesn't harm my enjoyment of the game whatsoever.
You also
Right,
poke a
and
little fun in the book about hiding injuries. And I think you maybe had a little fun with that and all that, and how players might use injuries as cover.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's just all these little gamesmanship things that go on, which is part of why we love baseball, not only the game itself, but all the analysis around the game and the lineups and the teams and, what is the team strategy? Who are they really trying? Are they trying to work in somebody and get a look at somebody? The gamesmanship with posting injuries in all sports, I think, is sort of comic relief some days when you read the blurbs and what they claim people have. And, yeah.
I think it's
Just
interesting because baseball is a game of so many stories. And when you were looking at, like, I thought what really helped bring this book for me together was that you had all of the other players that felt like real players and characters. And you had Joey Diaz, and I'm blanking on the name of the Cubs pitcher that he gets that is
Simons.
his like idol.
yeah,
Um,
Ted Simons. Yeah.
Simons, yeah.
Yeah.
And for me, I really liked that aspect of it because it made it feel like this, like you were on this journey with Frank. And I thought that was a really interesting way of looking at it, because it was also being like what it would be like to be this phenom coming up in Major League Baseball, and how it sort of others you from the rest of the team. Here's this guy that's so uniquely talented. The owners are getting involved. Major League Baseball is getting involved, trying to restrict it to him. And then I felt like that was such an interesting way of it being like, now there's these external forces that are piling on Frank. And it's not just his internal struggle that he's dealing with. He's also got to actualize outside of that and how other people perceive him.
Well, and that's a really good point. One of the inspiring real life things for that particular element was what happened to Ronald Acuna Jr. when he first came up. And I think he had 5 games where he hit a home run, and he was in his rookie year in May, I want to say. I'm not absolutely sure of this, but a pitcher with the Marlins, can't pull his name up right now, hit him in the elbow, I believe. It was a nasty situation. It was clear that baseball was saying, you're too young, too good to be doing what you're doing, and we're going to send you a message. And I remember one of my favorite podcasts, of course, this is my favorite podcast, almost Cooperstown, but no, I was one of the ESPN podcasts talking about how just outrageous a situation that was. And so, yeah, the sort of the mentality, we don't like upstarts. We don't like anybody who's a little bit too much of a showboat. You've got to earn your way into the sport, keep your head down, kind of a thing. It is fascinating. It's complex. It's really a fascinating thing. But I mean, a team itself, in the case of the Baltimore Orioles and Frank Reiter, and actually the Orioles, since the book has come out, has shown that a couple key players can really make a difference. And the sort of the psychology of the team can really take a new positive direction.
Mark, you wrote the book after the Cubs obviously won their World Series in 2016. So why did you have them as the foil for the Orioles, so to speak?
Good question. Well, first of all, I also wrote the book before the National League went to the designated hitter.
You mentioned that, yes.
Yeah. And so in a complicated kind of scenario, first of all, I wanted to do an American League team for Frank. I can't really tell you why, but I wanted him to be on a team. well, he was going to be the number one draft pick. And the year I was writing the book, the Orioles, I think the year before had 47 or 48 wins or something like that. So they were obviously going to have the number one pick. And I thought, boy, that just kind of works. I liked the Baltimore character, the kind of under the radar city. People didn't really think a lot about the Orioles, unless you were an Oriole fan, of course. It just sort of seemed to be a good match because he would be from Colorado. He'd be going to a very, very different city for him. And I felt that was a good contrast going from Colorado to the East Coast. And then I wanted to start the book with where it started, with him at the plate when the National League still let their pitchers hit. And if you were a visiting team, therefore, you would also have to hit. So my parents both grew up in Chicago. My father was a huge Cubs fan. I love Wrigley Field, and I just like that contrast between the Camden Yards, Wrigley Field. I didn't want to go for one of these. They're wonderful stadiums, parks, but they're kind of getting a little generic too, and sort of some of the West Coast things. I really wanted that variety of weather was going to be a huge thing, and I knew I wanted to use Chicago late in the book too, with wind and fog and nasty weather coming off the lake. So I'm just sort of into those older original cities, I guess, is my
And you
best answer I'm
resisted the
coming up with right
temptation
now.
to use the Red Sox, right? Because that would have been easy.
Well, and you guys on your wonderful deep dive podcast on the Red Sox point out something really great, which is there's just too much of the Red Sox. And I didn't want to go there. I mean, we just see them in movies and TV shows getting referenced all the time. And plus, they would never have the number one pick. They might be a bad team in the AL East, but they're never probably going to have the number one pick. And I didn't want Yankees, Red Sox, any of the kind of buzzy, talked about a lot about teams. I wanted to go somewhere that, and Baltimore fit it to a T, that just didn't get that kind of coverage either in fiction land or nonfiction land.
And it's been a good week for Orioles fans even this week because the Angelos family finally agreed to sell the team. And I've got to think, and we as Met fans, when, maybe everybody hates Steve Cohen, but we haven't tried having somebody with money actually put money in the team. And I'm hoping for the Orioles, the same thing happens with them.
I mean, doesn't every fan of every team, I happen to be a Rockies fan also. It's hard to believe you can be a fan of the Rockies, but come on, you want ownership that cares and wants to put a plan on the table and show their fans what the plan is. Is it pitching? Is it hitting? Is it speed? What is the plan? And by the way, we are going to invest because we're in the business of sports. That's about winning. Let's see let's come up with a strategy here and put some dollars behind it. This is not, we all know this is big dollar business. It's not going to be, it's not a yard sale you're running. It's a big operation. Let's go.
You explored Major League Baseball. Okay, so what would be their response to somebody who throws so hard that he makes Major League players look like little leaguers? And so what would they do? And you posit different things that they could do. And I found that to be interesting. There was no resolution to it, but the fact that Major League Baseball was even considering it, and Frank's response to it, which was a great speech at a point in the book that you should read. I think feels the way that I feel about baseball, about limiting human capacity. Maybe you could talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, just that idea of how does a league, I mean, every sport is a human construct, correct? I mean, every game is a human construct. We come up with the rules. We are constantly adjusting and tweaking all sports. Football has plenty of examples. Basketball raised the hoop. In baseball, they lowered the mound. When I think it was the year after Bob Gibson posted like a 1.13 ERA or something like that. And so they lowered the mound. These are manageable. It's physics. It's a matter of dimensions. It's a matter of trying to strike a balance. And I think it's kind of fascinating. And I think one of the reasons that we love baseball so much is because it's so built on failure. And even our best hitters are going to fail repeatedly. it's just part of the game. And if they were to really make it more equitable, and maybe, I mean, I'm just joking here and say no pitcher could ever throw over 100 miles an hour or over 95 and really give batters back some sort of their power. I mean, we'd be in for much longer games with much higher scoring, but I don't know if I'd like the game that much if it was just endless doubles, endless home runs. This is just a constantly tweaked environment that we're creating inside these ballparks in terms of trying to come up with a something that's presentable and entertaining. And I think to this day, baseball is still trying to figure that out because ratings are down. It's just not competing at the level that football does for eyeballs, and that's a concern. It's got to be a concern.
Well, and having an exciting player like that, have everybody focus on it, would be something that would bring, I think, interest back to baseball. And I think you do a great job of sort of, capturing the energy that would be created if you had somebody that just like he can get everybody out. He's like the most amazing guy we've ever seen. I
Yeah.
mean, your opening scene, and we'll talk a little bit about how about Gordon and I see this. There's a lot of cinematic aspects to this book.
Oh yeah.
Okay. I mean, the opening scene is, him throwing the ball from behind the center field face on a line to home plate. And we can picture it like, oh, that is right there. I can see it.
Oh, that's a trailer scene in a movie, 100%.
Yeah. Yeah, there were pros and cons among various readers about that prologue when he's in high school, and that's the inciting moment where he outs himself. Basically, he outs himself to his fellow classmates as a very good baseball player, and he kind of knows what he's doing. There's some energy where he wants to kind of reckon. It puts him on a journey of reckoning with this situation when he was a 12-year-old. So I fully buy into. I do like the prologue. I'm not a big prologue guy in general, but I think in that case it sort of sets up everything else in the rest of the book. But thanks. Yeah.
So talk about the idea. Have you had? There was some note I think I was reading about. There's maybe some interest in some parties on making a movie. Where are things? Anywhere? Any interest there? Any people? Because we think it would make a great movie.
Mm-hmm.
Well, who do you know? Let's get some talk
Well,
going.
I'm serious. I'm serious about trying to find a way. I think the story has all the elements, and we haven't had a great. And Gordon and I did a podcast on baseball movies, and I think that's why I went back and reread the book, because I thought maybe Trouble with the Curve is probably the last feature baseball movie, I guess. Not that there haven't been other ones that have been good since then, but something like that. And so why is that? And so maybe you can
We
offer
should fix that.
Yeah. Well, my agent has somebody in his office who apparently, allegedly, I gather, is out, on a regular basis presenting it to producers or however that works, because I certainly don't understand how that works. And the book has been out for 13 months, which, obviously it could get picked up at any time down the road. I don't think it has to get picked up right away at all. But, I have to say, 60 or 70, 80% of the readers, if they reach out to me or contact me, make the same kind of mention about they'd love to see it as a film. I do think it sets itself up pretty well along those lines. I don't, know. I've heard people say you ought to write a screenplay for it and put a treatment together and then take that out and get that sold. My head just doesn't go to that space of turning something I've already written into another format. It's just not something, unless somebody were to come with a big check and say, would you please spend the next 6 months doing that? Then I would take a run at it. And I would work with some friends who are screenplay writers. But as a writer, you just have to decide where to spend your next if creative time. Are you going to put it into X or Y? And I've chosen to keep going with another novel. So that's just, I mean, it's part of the conversation. There's just the sheer number of books that come out every year, and how, in comparison, how few movies get made is just, it's insane, because there are so many books. And probably half of us writers think that our books are worthy movies. and that's just not going to
Well, and
happen.
this, we're starved for some unknown reason for video content, right? Every platform's looking for something new. So instead of reading books, and this is a whole nother conversation we could talk about, people
Yeah.
are into the visual aspect, which is why this can translate into a movie, I think, in a way that I've had a few people I said on the book, and they said, "Yeah, I don't read that much anymore."
Yeah.
Like this, that's not the answer that I was looking for.
No.
So,
Yeah.
and you've written other books. I see you're a mystery writer, and you've got a series, the Alison Coyle, is it saying a
Yep.
series, and that's
Yep.
a 4 or 5 books.
5 books. Yep. Yep. And I've got a couple other crime fiction novels with my agent that we just talked today, as a matter of fact. And he's got some plans for that. And I've got another non-mystery that I finished up. In fact, today he called me and said he found it lovely and complicated, and which is exactly what I wanted to hear. So he's
Sounds
all
like you
in
got
on
it.
the new book. Yeah. So I'm excited about that as well.
I definitely have to check. I'm a big fan of true crime and mystery novels, so I'll definitely have to check out some of the new stuff because I like Fireballer so much. I'm sure I'll enjoy the other stuff.
Well, I appreciate that, but I just they're different. It's just more playing with the straight up mystery genre. The main character in that series is a female hunting guide, based on a woman I met in the Flat Tops Wilderness of Western Colorado years ago. And I stand by those books. I'm very proud to have written them, and I'm also just as shocked as anyone that along came a non-crime fiction novel into my lap and that I somehow pulled it off. And I'm still kind of shaking my head at how that exactly happened, but
I
it's
think
okay.
I saw Joe Posnanski had listed that it's up for a Casey Award, the Fireballer. So
It was
that's
up.
exciting.
It was up for the Casey, but Joe won the Casey, as a monster like that probably should. And he and I will be on a panel together at the Tucson Festival of Books in March. So I'm looking forward to congratulating him at that point. But The Fireballer was the only novel on the 11 book list of finalists for the Casey. And today found out that The Fireballer won the Twin Bill Baseball Literary Magazine's Best Novel of the Year for 2023. So
Congratulations.
yeah, thanks. Yeah.
So a couple of questions. So Rockies, Red Sox, World Series. You're in Denver. So much of the book takes place in Denver. Where were you in that situation? How did you root?
I was torn because, of course, the Red Sox had 2004, and getting in 2007 was just such a thrill for Denver. Obviously, I wanted it to go 7 games. That did not happen. I was perfectly fine with the Red Sox getting back in, another W under their belt and kind of making sure 2004 wasn't a one-off. So I was absolutely torn. I was one of those fans who was going to be fine either way. Um, and in retrospect, the Red Sox definitely were the better team. They mowed the Rockies right down. And also in retrospect, the Rockies, I'm glad they didn't win it because they've been just sorry, Rockies guys, but they've just been not so good to the town. I'm surprised. There should be a fan revolt
You agree?
based on how poor they do. And I don't think they have any right to have a World Series trophy on their shelf. That's how awful I feel about the ownership of the Rockies and what they're doing. They have millions of fans. They get 2+ million fans walk through those gates, and they just sit back, and I think they like that gate revenue, and they're just fine. Take TV revenue, gate revenue, and don't care about winning. That is cynical and wrong.
And it's a beautiful ballpark. I've seen a game at Coors Field. My daughter and Gordon's sister lives in Denver, so we're out there.
Ah,
And we had
She lived like right. I think she lived like right by Coors Field at one point.
in the shadow
that's
of
great.
Coors Field, and so we're connected to Denver and feel the same thing. We even had Jillian Jibe on our podcast a few years ago. And she is the official scorer for the Rockies. One of the few, if any, she might have been the only one at the time, I think, doing that in the major league. So Colorado does some things right, I guess, but not about in terms of putting a baseball team on the field. That's for sure.
No.
Yeah. Well, the Broncos have a strong track record, some obviously lots of problems right now. Nuggets, hello, world champions, definitely in it to win. Avalanche have been right there,
Right.
competitive for years. Let's go. Come on.
Oh yeah. Rockies, get it together. The rest
Yeah.
of your sports brethren are leaving you behind.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
Absolutely.
the book is called The Fireballer. Mark Stevens is the author. It's Lake Union Publishing. You can find it on his website, writer Mark Stevens, STEVENS.com. You also can go on Amazon and any of the other platforms and purchase the book. We recommend it highly. Mark, we're thrilled to have you, and we're going to talk more about a movie. I think this is a movie, and sure like to find a way to help you do it.
It's been such a pleasure to talk to such really passionate baseball and knowledgeable baseball fans. I just really enjoyed this a lot. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
Thank you
Mark.
for coming. We appreciate it.